Welcome to the Masonic Authors Guild International's podcast, The Wide Masonic World. Hello, I'm Mark Tabbert with Robert L.D. Cooper. Dr. Natalie Bayer specializes in European intellectual history. A native of Rostov-on-the-Don in southern Russia, she graduated from Moscow State University with a degree in modern European history. She received her Ph.D. in European intellectual history from Rice University, USA, in 2007. Bayer joined the history department at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa in 2010, where she teaches a variety of courses, including European Enlightenment, History of European Nationalism, World History, History of the Russian Empire, and the History of the USSR, as well as courses on the daily life in the Soviet Union, the Old Regime, the French Revolution, and the Russian Revolution of 1917. She publishes on the European Enlightenment as seen through the lens of Freemasonry and other secret societies. Together with Robert Collis, she authored Initiating the Millennium, the Avignon Society and Illuminism in Europe, published by Oxford University Press in 2019. Today we are going to discuss her paper, Enlightenment or Counter-Enlightenment in Russia, Freemasons Writing History in the Late 18th Century, published in the International Journal of History, Culture and Modernity, 2019, Volume 7. Welcome, Professor Bayer.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Hello, Natalie, if I may. Firstly, I have to say that the 19th century is not my period of interest, and I don't know very much at all about Russian history. So if my questions seem a little bit simplistic, I apologize for that, as well as my horrible pronunciations, but I will do my best. War and Peace by Tolstoy was published in 1869, and Freemasonry features heavily in his discussion of Russian society, discussion and description of Russian society. Two individuals in particular are referred to, which is Ivan E. Lagin, I think it's pronounced, and Catherine II, Catherine the Great. Lagin was an unofficial secretary, I believe, to Catherine. A major concern of many Masonic historians, particularly in the West, at this point in time anyway, is that the writings of individual Freemasons or people writing about Freemasonry are often interpreted as if they speak for Freemasonry in its totality. Do you have any thoughts on that point?
Yes. Let me begin by saying that this is not a simplistic question at all. I think it goes straight to the heart of how I think we should study Freemasonry historically. One of the major pitfalls of looking at any movement, intellectual, cultural, social, is this temptation to treat this movement, and I think this is the case of Freemasonry, as if it were a single coherent ideological system. And often in reality, it's not. So in my work, I try to consider Freemasonry functioning more like a container rather than a doctrine. What I see in the writings of the Freemasons I research, they're using it as a space into which individuals pour very different ideas, expectations, and in Russian case, spiritual needs. So to treat any writings of any individual Mason, whether it's Yelagin, whether it's Novikov, or even famous Western figures like Lessing or Anderson, as representatives of one coherent movement, is to, I think, impose coherence where the actual historical actors might not have seen it. And I think this is especially true in Russia. We know that Freemasonry arrived to Russia piecemeal. It's arrived through translation, and I don't mean translation in terms of languages. You know, educated Russians knew French and perhaps a little bit of English, and they spoke German better than they spoke Russian, but cultural translation of Western systems. So English, German, Swedish, Rosicrucian, Martinist influences overlapped in ways that would have baffled many Western Masons. To add to this layer of complexity, many Russian Masons were what I would call selective participants. So they were drawing from Freemasonry what suited their spiritual, moral, and social needs. To give you an example, I'm thinking here about maybe a group of Scottish stonemasons who, as we discussed, Bob, before, came to Russia with the architect Cameron to build a new westernized capital. So do they speak for Freemasonry? Or do the Russian high aristocrats who were interested in mysticism speak for Freemasonry? Or does Catherine the Great, who satirized Freemasonry, speak for Freemasonry? Or does Tolstoy, who was writing, in the 19th century, looking back and researching, does he write for Freemasonry? The answer is, of course, is none of them, and at the same time, all of them, right?
This podcast is for educational purposes and perhaps entertainment. While the Masonic Authors Guild International provides the most accurate information possible, listeners use the information at their own risk. This podcast and its contents are Magi's property, as are all the opinions and information it presents. Robert L.D. Cooper's, Mark A. Tabbert's, and Professor Natalie Bayer's views and opinions within the podcast do not represent nor speak for Freemasonry, any Masonic organization, their former or current employers, in any way, shape, or form. Magi, Cooper, Tabbert, or Bayer will not compensate you in any way whatsoever if you ever happen to suffer an inconvenience due to the information herein contained.